Hello and welcome to a unique set of video briefings from DC employment solicitors, arising as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic and the unprecedented impact that it's having on employment law. In our first collection of videos, I'll be looking at the Coronavirus Job Retention Scheme, or Furlough scheme for short. In this episode, I'll be taking a look at who's actually covered by the scheme and answering some of the frequently asked questions that many of our clients have asked since it was introduced. This video was recorded on the 6th of April and takes into account the government's updated guidance published on the 4th of April. However, as the guidance is constantly changing, in order to keep updated, please have a look at our guidance notes on our website. All of the links are below, which are regularly refreshed as more information comes to light. Also, apologies for the rather amateurish production quality of this video. I'm filming this from my study in Tibble Towers rather than in our fancy studio in the office. So, let's firstly set the scene with some background information about the Coronavirus Job Retention Scheme. As a result of the economic impact of the COVID-19 pandemic, the government introduced the scheme in order to avoid redundancies by reducing the pressure on employers to continue paying wages in full during the crisis period. Now, the furlough scheme was first announced on the 26th of March and the government published some guidance on the same date. This guidance was substantially updated on the 4th of April, and the link to this guidance is all set out below. Now, in simple terms, the scheme allows employers to agree with their employees that they'll be put on temporary leave of absence, otherwise known as furlough, which then allows the employer to recover a proportion of that pay from HMRC in respect of employees who are on furlough leave. Now, given that the reimbursement that employers can seek per employee is limited either to the lower of 80% of wage costs or £2,500 per calendar month, plus employer national insurance contributions and employer auto-enrolment pension contributions, it's understandably proving to be popular amongst many employers who are trying to amend the contracts of those employees put on furlough to match the level of reimbursement that can be claimed back from the government. The scheme is backdated to the 1st of March 2020. It's open for at least 3 months and will be extended by the government if it proves to be necessary. Now, it's important not to forget that it's essential to obtain the employee's agreement to be placed on furlough leave, and that this agreement is recorded in writing, not least so that you can evidence that fact for HMRC when it comes to claiming the money back from them. And with that in mind, if you want a copy of our free furlough agreement, follow the link below and we'll send one to you. So let's have a look at the particular types of individuals who are covered under the scheme. In broad terms, the scheme covers people who are either employees or workers, provided that they were on the employer's PAYE payroll on or before 28 February 2020. Therefore, this would include full-time and part-time employees, employees on agency contracts, employees on flexible or zero-hour contracts, and apprentices, as long as they're paid at least the relevant apprenticeship national minimum wage rate for all the time they spent training. As well as what we would consider to be traditional employees, the updated government guidance issued on the 4th of April has also said that other individuals who may not be seen as employees per se are also covered under the scheme, as long as they're paid via PAYE. Now, in broad terms, this covers office holders, including company directors, salaried members of limited liability partnerships, agency workers, including those employed by umbrella companies, and individuals who are known as Lim B workers, which in general terms would amount to someone who'd be viewed as a casual worker. The updated government guidance provides further clarification about the application of the scheme to these groups of non-traditional employees, and again, I've put the link below, or obviously feel free to get in touch if that would help. Finally, as an aside, I'm sure that you're aware that the genuinely self-employed aren't covered by the furlough scheme, but on the 26th of March the government announced the introduction of a new self-employed income support scheme, under which eligible self-employed individuals may be eligible for a taxable grant of 80% of their average monthly trading profit over the last 3 years, up to a £2,500 a month maximum. So which employers are eligible for reimbursement? Now, the eligibility criteria for employers is quite straightforward. Basically, the scheme's open to any employer who had created and shared a PAYE payroll scheme on or before the 28th of February 2020, has enrolled for PAYE online and has got a UK bank account. Therefore, the scheme covers businesses, charities, recruitment agencies with agency workers, all paid through PAYE, and public authorities, although the government has said that it would expect that the scheme will not be used by many public sector organisations, as the majority of public sector employees are continuing to provide essential public services or contribute to the response to the COVID-19 outbreak. Now, that's a brief review of the eligibility for both individuals and employers. So now let's take a look at some of the frequently asked questions arising out of this issue. So firstly, can employees whose employment terminated before the scheme was announced be re-engaged by their previous employer and then furloughed? The answer is yes. The guidance confirms that employees who were made redundant since the 28th of February 2020 can qualify if they're re-engaged by their former employer. The update to the guidance on the 4th of April confirms that this extends to anyone who, quote, stopped working for the employer on or after the 28th of February 2020. So what about employees who've already been given notice of redundancy or placed on unpaid leave before furlough leave was announced? Now, as the scheme is backdated to the 1st of March 2020, it's theoretically possible for an employer to propose to employees who are still employed but have been given notice of redundancy or placed on unpaid leave after the 28th of February 2020 that they be put on furlough leave instead. Now, as I mentioned earlier, employees made redundant since the 28th of February can be re-engaged and put on furlough leave, although the employer isn't obliged to do this. Now, this would therefore arguably appear to include employees who were given notice of redundancy before the 28th of February for a reason unconnected with the pandemic. However, the scheme doesn't appear to cover employees who were placed on unpaid leave on or before the 28th of February. Next, can an employer subsequently make employees on furlough redundant if the business is forced to close? Now, in spite of the furlough scheme, some businesses will still ultimately be forced to close. Therefore, there doesn't appear to be any reason in the guidance to prevent an employer from making employees who've been furloughed redundant where a business is ultimately forced to close. Can employees who elected to take unpaid leave to be able to look after their children home from school be put on furlough leave instead? Now, the government's 4th of April update says that employees who were unable to work because of caring responsibilities arising from COVID-19 can be furloughed. Next, can an employee who's self-isolating or on sick leave be furloughed? No, you can't claim a repayment under the scheme for employees while they're getting statutory sick pay, but they can be furloughed and claimed for once they're no longer receiving statutory sick pay and are back from sick leave. Can employees who are shielding be placed on furlough? The updated guidance says that employers can claim for furloughed employees who are shielding in line with public health guidance or who need to stay home with someone who is shielding. However, the new guidance goes on to say that this will only apply where the employee is unable to work from home and would otherwise be redundant. Now, this later statement seems to be in contrast to the general position at the start of the guidance, which says that it's designed to help employers whose operations have been severely affected by coronavirus to retain their employees and protect the UK economy. It's not clear how making the condition for furlough different for those who are shielding meets this objective. So, for example, it appears that an employee who's on unpaid leave due to childcare or other caring responsibilities may be furloughed if that will help the employer retain that employee. But an employee who's on unpaid leave due to shielding would only be eligible if they were at risk of redundancy. It seems unusual that the government will restrict their eligibility under the scheme and not others. Now, I hope that this is just an oversight on the part of the government at the moment, but we'll have to await further guidance from the government as and when it's published. So what happens if my employee has more than one job? Well, the guidance says if your employee has more than one employer, they can be furloughed for each job. Each job is treated separately and the cap applies to each employer individually. So employees can be furloughed in one job and receive a furloughed payment, but continue working for their other employer and receive their normal wages. Okay, so that was a whistle-stop tour of the eligibility criteria under the furlough scheme and some of the commonly asked questions that arise on the topic of eligibility. As I've mentioned, the guidance on this topic is rapidly changing and therefore it's always sensible to keep checking the guidance or our website for the most up-to-date information. In the next episode, I'll look at how an employer should actually go about implementing a furlough scheme and answer some FAQs on that particular topic. Thanks for watching.